Well, the nothing else is rather strange. I mean, they represent a negotiation position, meaning that that is the position of the EU and the US in this stage after 2.5 years of negotiations. And what we find in those positions is quite concerning and also demonstrates some false promises. So I don't get the just description is rather awkward in this situation.
She says, I'm not in the business of lowering standards.
Well, unfortunately, if you look at the documents that are now since this morning available to everybody who wants to read it, can dive into it and draw their own conclusions. And as we've read it and we've extensively checked the text together also with several media who had the original pieces in advance, that is unfortunately what we can conclude. Malmstrom is in the business of lowering standards. We see that standards we have to protect our environment, to protect our health, our food safety, are basically under attack, and that is deeply concerning.
But we've had since another round of negotiations going into it. Most notably, we heard the French president saying he won't sign on to anything that does away with, for instance, geographical denominations for food, for instance, so people can be assured of the quality of it. Do you feel as though the politicians are coming on board?
I mean, well, let's just say I hope that he sticks to that statement. But right now, when you look at the documents, when you look at the position of the EU, there's a significant difference in what the EU made public as their input for the position. And what's entirely new, by the way, what wasn't known before, was the position of the US. And you basically see the EU moving towards the US. We see that what's known as the precautionary principle in the EU, so basically you cannot put anything on the market unless it's proven safe, is under attack. In the US, it's the other way around. When you want to put a product on the market, you have to, in the US, you have the right to do it, and it's up to you as a consumer or the government to prove it's dangerous. And basically, it's the other way around. And it seems like we are taking over that principle.
Taking over that principle, but things like we've heard politicians over the last 2 weeks say that things like it would mean that we'll have more and more hormone beef and the such. They're saying that's overblown.
Well, no, it's a serious possibility. I mean, listen, there is literally an article. I can refer you to the exact chapter, the exact page number that says it's a position of the EU that we will go for mutual recognition. So what that means is we have standards in the EU or rules in the EU. You have them in the US. In the EU, they're much higher on many levels, but we're going to recognize them. We're going to recognize the rule of the U.S. That means that, let's just say, when something that's produced in the European Union, that's not allowed to have all these hazardous chemicals, right? So like in the European Union, we have a list of 1,300 toxic chemicals that are forbidden. In the U.S., that's only 80. So with recognizing each other's rules and regulations, it is possible that meat with a lot of hormones, with a lot of antibiotics that is allowed in the U.S., will be allowed to be exported to the European Union. So it is possible that we're going to have that on our plates.
Let me ask you this, Faiza Ulassen, does it really help? Is it really in the best interest of the public to leak documents during a bargaining process? Is it going to make both sides freeze up from now on?
Listen, the TTIP treaty is going to have a profound impact on people in their, on many aspects in the daily lives of people. This is about our food safety. It's about the environment. It's also about medicine, animal welfare, labor rights, even internet privacy. People have the right to know what's going on. People have the right to know what is being negotiated on behalf of them. And I think it's time right now, considering the false promises and what we read in these documents, it's time to stop the negotiations, make everything public, because we only have a part of the negotiation text, and start the debate.
Make everything public? Are you suggesting we should have, cameras inside the negotiating room?
Well, let's start with making it more transparent. I mean, why don't they just put all the chapters on the internet for starters? Look at the climate negotiations in Paris. Those are entirely open. Look at the trade negotiations in the World Trade Organization. Those are much more open and transparent. Why can't we do the same with this?
One final question for you, because it was a subject that was brought up when we brought it up in the France 24 debate last week. Businesses saying they're in favor, small businesses, in favor of this idea of an arbitration process between the U.S. And the EU. What is Greenpeace's exact stance on that?
Well, we're against it. I mean, we have a proper rule of law in many European countries, also on a European level, and there is no reason to create some sort of extra privilege for businesses that is only allowed for businesses and not for citizens.
Businesses argue that they don't have the means to fight their corner in a U.S. court.
Well, I mean, I think it's rather hard to basically to undermine rule of law and to make like a separate court that doesn't even consist of judges in order for companies to sue the state for a democratically made decision. I mean, I think that's rather hard. And we see already examples in real life to what it leads. I mean, for example, after the nuclear disaster in Japan, in Fukushima, Germany decided, after a lot of public pressure, to close their nuclear plants. What happened was that a Swedish company called Vattenfall, used that same ISDS clause from some sort of trade agreement in order to sue the government and demand billions of euros of tax money from the government, while it's a decision that's taken in the public interest and democratically done. Does it make sense that we give this privilege to corporations, undermining our democracy?
All right.
It doesn't.
One final question. Right now, they're talking about an end-of-year deadline. It's not looking likely at this point, but should there be some kind of an agreement in the end? Are you against all agreements between the EU and the US?
No, it's not about being against agreements, and it's certainly not about being against trade. I mean, of course, you would say, if you look at the documents, they're still far away. But mind you, I mean, a week ago, Obama and Merkel expressed the very clear ambition that they want to go ahead with this. And I think it's very possible that they will still present a definite text somewhere this year. And I think what's important that there's more transparency, and that this has to be more democratic. Like, our democratically chosen parliamentarians in all EU member states and in the European Parliament don't even have like proper access to the information without being extremely restricted. The public doesn't know what's going on. I mean, trade is happening. It has been happening for decades, centuries between Europe and the United States. Many people have iPhones that come from the US, so along with other projects, but they need to stick to the European rules. I mean, not having this treaty is not going to bar trade, but we need to have, if we're going to have treaties, we need to have a balanced approach that does not only include the interest of industry, but also the interest of civil society and citizens.